Okay, so welcome everybody to the HDFC Coalition's 2021 Candidates Forum Series. Tonight we are gathered to hear from an esteemed group of public servants in their run for Manhattan Borough President. In a few minutes, they will name and introduce themselves in a brief 2-minute statement. On the coalition side, I am joined by steering committee members Tina De Felicia Antonio of the Artists HDFC in Chelsea, who will be moderating tonight's Q&A. Cheryl Douglas of the 35 Mount Morris Park West HDFC, who will be, along with me, asking the 4 questions for tonight's candidates. Bruce Robertson of the Grinnell HDFC in West Harlem will be our gentle timekeeper. And remember, all responses, whether they're opening, closing, or the questions, are just 2 minutes for tonight. John McBride of the 241 West 111th Street HDFC will be helping Tina out, sort out the questions for the Q&A. Hey, Ben.
Hello.
Hanaleo is having some issue in the interpretation room, and I'm not sure what the issue is. It may be have to do with her internet access. It's spotty right now, and so we may not be able to have interpretation for tonight. But just in case she is able to chime in, she'll let me know, and then hopefully those of us who speak Spanish will be able to go into the interpretation room. My name is Michael Palma, and I'm from the 601 West 136th Street HDFC, and I'll be your moderator for the first half of the evening tonight. Before we start, I would like to note the amazing and incredible life of April Tyler, who was one of the original founding members of the HDFC Coalition and our key leader, who unexpectedly passed away about 4 weeks ago. Always a West Harlem advocate in all aspects of neighborhood and political life, April's activism knew no bounds in her selfless quest for social justice and equitable treatment for all. Like most of us in the coalition, April advocated to protect the rights of HDFC shareholders as private homeowners. In her selfless, and worked tirelessly for just and fair legislation based on community input. The New York City, West Harlem, and the HDFC community feel the loss of her presence here tonight, of her leadership, and of her clarity of thought on all things that affected the lives of Upper Manhattan residents. And yet we know in our hearts and in our minds that April is here with us tonight, continuing with her work and with the work of many others who have long passed before her, in order to bring a sense of fairness and equity to HDFCs and their shareholders. Our thoughts and prayers are with her family and her children. I would also like to take this time to thank the West Harlem Progressive Democratic Club and the club's president, Lois Penny, and treasurer, Barry Weinberg, for facilitating tonight's Zoom meeting. And now on with the show. Borough presidents play a crucial role among the city's political leadership. They lend their voice and their weight of their office on a wide range of issues, from land use to property development, and especially for us here tonight, on housing issues. BPs can sponsor legislation in partnership with city council members. They allocate millions in capital funding, and they appoint members to community boards, to the City Planning Commission, and to local community education councils. They have a great deal of leeway to pursue their vision for Manhattan, and their impact is only limited by how effectively they can use their bully pulpit to realize that vision. HDFCs are and will continue to be one of the major priorities for New York City, and in particular, Manhattan, where most HDFCs reside. To be frank, HDFCs have been a major force and anchor for community development in many neighborhoods throughout all the 5 boroughs. For many immigrants, people of color, and first-time homeowners, HDFC Cooperative Life has offered many with a rare opportunity to build generational wealth and have provided us with a community and our community the ability to take control and guide our own future in a manner which we see best to do that. As owners of private property, HDFC shareholders have saved their buildings and secured their homes and neighborhoods, and in doing so, have secured a path to living out the American dream. There are over 1,200 HDFC co-ops in New York City, representing about 26,000 households. More than half of those numbers are in Manhattan alone, representing nearly 18,000 voters from within the borough, and who are extremely interested in what will be said here tonight. That is, by the candidates for Manhattan Borough President and their vision for HDFCs. 4 questions will be asked on issues that concern HDFC shareholders, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond so that sufficient time can be dedicated to field questions from attendees. Cheryl Douglas and I will take turns in asking questions. After the 4 questions have been asked and answered, we'll open up the forum to a Q&A from our attendees led by Tina DiFelici-Antonio. Before asking the 4 questions, I would like to ask the candidates to introduce themselves in a 2-minute statement. At the end of the webinar, we will ask them to make closing remarks again in 2 minutes, in 2-minute statements. And now, in alphabetical order, I would like to ask the candidates to introduce themselves, starting with Lindsey Boylan.
This is very exciting. Kim and I, we should just reverse order this sometimes. I'm really proud to be here tonight. I think there's probably no group that has greater importance. I would say they're equal importance, but then families that have built their lives through the HDFC program. I have spent my whole career in urban planning since I came to New York. In that time, I lived in 9 apartments in 10 years after coming here with $100 in my pocket. I was most recently the Secretary for Economic Development and Housing at the state level. So some interaction with HDFCs and HPD to a limited amount, more so NYCHA. And I think that this job outside of the mayor's role is the most pivotal, most important for New York's future, and particularly for charting a new path for this city, one that's more equitable, creates a more livable environment, and rights some of the historic wrongs. And I think it's no surprise that, or it's no accident that HDFCs were really a response to the 70s and 80s and trying to create a new pathway forward. So I think we're in a very similar moment, not the same reality, but similar challenging time. And I see a bigger role to play in the future. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited for the opportunity to have our conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lindsey. And now Elizabeth Caputo.
Sure, thank you very much. And thanks, Michael, and to everyone within all of the work that you're doing. I have been at the forefront of housing and equity my entire career as a Manhattan Community Board Chair and throughout my 25 years of living and working in Manhattan. Just a little bit about me. My name is Elizabeth Caputo. I'm running for Manhattan Borough President, as you know. Just a few things. Again, I have lived throughout many apartments over the years in the same neighborhood. My one constant has been the Upper West Side here in Manhattan for 25 years now. I have lived here, I have worked here. I understand the struggles of every person who has had to work, especially working women, those in the middle class, those who are trying to get to home ownership and can't. I've been a renter the entire time. I live with my partner, Jose, and our dog, Bruno. I grew up in the Midwest. My parents moved here to New York around the same time I did 25 years ago, and we're focused on public education. It's a big piece of why I'm running for this job, is to make sure that our schools are equitable, and that dovetails right into housing issues. I currently work full-time at the World Economic Forum, where I bridge sort of cities to global economies around the world. And I chaired during my time before becoming a community board chair, the largest volunteer progressive organization in the city, democratic leadership for the 21st century. I'm running for this job because Manhattan's at a turning point and we need to recover so many things that have been lost during COVID. And there's not really a single person or ideology that's going to bring that back. But what it's really going to require is somebody who can build bridges. So throughout my 25 years of living and working here, I have bridged the public and private, global and local, and neighborhoods in particular. I have placed community, inclusivity, and equity at the heart of everything I've done. Part of the reason that I care about the issue tonight with HDFC is that there needs to be more communication and coordination between the city agencies. And you can only do that if you've been somebody like a community board chair, as I did for 3 years, who can use the power of the office to bring those groups together, make sure every perspective is considered. That being said, we need to make sure that these programs are more accommodating and recognize the successful model of what the HDFC program has done over the years. So I want to be that champion for you, and I look forward to talking to you more about it tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Brad Hoylman.
Thanks, Michael. Good to see everyone, including my colleagues for this office. Good to represent HDFCs in the State Senate. I'm Brad Hoylman, represent the 27th District in Manhattan. I wasn't born in New York, but I'll die in New York City. I was raised in rural West Virginia in a town so small that in order to get to my house, you had to take a left at the barn. I lived at the end of the dirt road with 5 brothers and sisters, 1 bathroom. My colleagues have heard me say this, an early preview of Manhattan living. I came to New York 27 years ago, began my career actually in law as an affordable housing lawyer at the New York City Housing Partnership, but quickly became involved in local community affairs, became a district leader, community board chair for 3 years, ran for state senate 10 years ago. Over the last 10 years, I think I've developed a reputation for taking on big challenges. I took on big tobacco and banned flavored e-cigarettes, took on vaxxers and made certain that all children were vaccinated during the measles outbreak of 2 years ago when 1,000 kids got sick. I took on the real estate industry and continue to do that now by trying to pass something called the pied-à-terre tax, which we hope to pass in this budget to provide at least $3 billion worth of funding for public housing and other affordable housing in the city of New York. And I even took on Donald Trump by forcing the disclosure of his taxes at the state level if Congress requested them. I have a reputation for getting big things done. That's the kind of energy and activism I want to bring to this office. I think fundamentally, this office is a planner in chief. It's also the organizer in chief. I want to organize tenants. I want to organize HDFCs. I want to create an HDFC help center in the borough president's office. I want to provide the technical assistance that HDFCs have been starved for. You can't get help from HPD. You can't get help from the Attorney General. Let's make the borough president office the convener of HDFCs and take on these big challenges and make sure that home ownership is regarded as the precious resource that it should be. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to point out that Bruce Robertson is holding up a timer, counting down to 2 minutes. So please keep your eye on that as much as you can. Next is Ben Kallos.
Hi, I'm Councilmember Ben Kallos. I'm co-chair of the Progressive Caucus, and I'm running for Manhattan Borough President because anywhere else in America, people struggle to get out, but here in New York City, people struggle to stay. And I believe that together we can fix that. I grew up right here in Manhattan, graduated from Bronx High School of Science and our state university system. This one's hard. Living with my mom, who passed away yesterday, and I wanted to do this because I know how you accommodated to scheduling this for me. I was sharing a room with her, and we lived with my grandparents, and I was on free and reduced school lunch, and I was so ashamed for the other kids to know how poor I was that I didn't eat. That's why I fought in the city council, and we won free school lunch, and I want to feed every child dinner as part of universal after school so we can end youth hunger. If ownership is the American dream, I gave up on that dream a long time ago with 5.4 million other renters in New York City. I've been a tenant all my life. During my wife's high-risk pregnancy, the landlord spiked our rent. We couldn't afford it. We moved to another one-bedroom apartment between daycare and full-time jobs. Sharing one bedroom with a baby didn't seem so bad. At least we could stay. In the pandemic, our home just wasn't enough, just like so many other people who are underhoused. When our lease came up, we looked around, but everything wasn't within our price range or had something wrong with it, or one broker asked us for a $10,000 broker fee.
Estamos mirando y nos encontramos con que
Decided to
no
go
teníamos
all in on New
acceso
York.
para
We created our life
ningún
savings,
apartamento.
our 401ks, put our living expenses on credit cards, all so we could afford to make a down payment on that state condition apartment. I couldn't be prouder to double down on New York, but we can change all that. No one should have to do that. Let's offer affordable homes starting at $23,000 like we're doing in a new HDFC in my district.
Entonces,
For homeless families.
tuvimos que poner todos nuestros ahorros y pedir cartas de crédito y porque no había manera de conseguir un apartamento y eso tiene que cambiar ahora.
Thank you, Ben. Is everybody hearing the Spanish or is it just me?
Muchas
Yes.
gracias.
Hannah, I don't know how I can put you in the.
I am already in the interpreting room.
Yeah, but we're hearing you in the other room.
Were folks able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I was able to hear you too.
No, but you're in the room. You're talking over the candidates right now.
Oh, okay. Just Barry put me on because I signed in a different link and he put me on.
Right, but you're until you can get into the Spanish room, you're talking above the candidates.
Oh, okay.
So if you can hold off until you figure it out, that would be great. Next is Mark Levine. Mark?
Well, thank you so much, Mike, and thanks to the coalition for bringing us together tonight. It's great to see my colleagues, and Ben, I am just so deeply sorry for your loss, and I'm in awe of your poise and fortitude and being here tonight. This has been such a year of loss, but my goodness, the loss of April Tyler, too painful for words. April and I were friends and colleagues since 1999. Someone who impacted me in many ways, and who I miss dearly. It's kind of hard to believe that she is gone. I know that her loss weighs on all of us here tonight. No hay traducción simultánea, así que un fuerte saludo a todos los hispanoparlantes. I have the honor of representing perhaps more HDFCs than any other district in the city, in Manhattan Valley, in Hamilton Heights, West Harlem, and Southern Washington Heights, where I live. I want to thank all of you, HDFC shareholders, for what you have done through sweat equity to turn around your buildings, your blocks, and really whole communities over the last 30 or 40 years. You have changed the trajectory of neighborhoods all over this city, and you deserve the thanks of this city. Unfortunately, too often what you've gotten is you've been ignored by policymakers or misunderstood, underappreciated, sometimes attacked. And the truth is that this is one of the most successful pillars of housing, of affordable housing in New York City. And I have been proud to stand with you, to fight for you, to win for HDFCs on a policy level citywide when you've come under attack, and in individual buildings, which maybe I'll have time to talk about tonight, where in dozens of cases I've been able to save buildings from third-party transfer. Excited to talk more about this in the coming discussion. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Mark. And Ben, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to also pay our condolences to you on the passing of your mom. I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties, but we're very sorry to hear that. And last and certainly not least, Kim Watkins.
Thank you so much, Michael. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Kim Watkins, and I believe I'm the only candidate running for Manhattan Borough President who is an owner in an HDFC, and I currently serve on my board at 100 St. Nicholas HDFC, where we just transitioned out of the 25-year expiration of tax exemption and are going through that process right now. I am just last night, I was on a different Zoom and we were talking about like the reason to run for office. So you really got to have a problem You know, I'm one of the least known people running in this race because my public service record is built around the public school system and public school parent leaders. I'm the president of CEC3. In many ways, we have been pushed off to the side by something called mayoral control, where elected leaders within our school districts have so little authority, so little sort of agency in how our schools are running. And the one thing that makes me as angry as I could possibly be is the notion that we just saw the $34.3 billion budget presented to us for the DOE, which is $34,000 per student in our system. Yet the base rate for students at the fair student funding level is $5,000 per student. So there's a huge gap. And I think there are a lot of similarities between the way that we have privatized a lot of public education, the way that we have overly complicated the structures around public schooling and public housing. I stand with HDFC. I'm very excited to have the conversation tonight about expanding the program, reforming the regulations, and then also making sure that we figure out a way to correct some of the wrongs that have been inflicted on residents by third-party transfers and the complicated legislation that goes along with it.
Kim, thank you so much, fellow HDFC shareholder. Now we're on to the 4 questions, and I'd like to introduce Cheryl Douglas, who will be asking the questions. She'll ask the first one, she'll ask the last one, and I'll ask the 2 in between. So Cheryl, take it away.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us on this Zoom. Again, my condolences to the Kallos family. Heartfelt sympathies are sent out to you and everyone who has been affected by your loss. The first question that I'd like to ask is, secure and affordable home ownership is a stabilizing force for families and communities. Please explain how you, as Manhattan Borough President, would use your office and its powers to stabilize existing HDFCs and create more affordable home ownership.
And let's do it in alphabetical order again with Lindsey.
Sure. You know, I have to say I agree with Kim on this one in both expanding HDFCs and also making the path to long-term preservation and ownership easier. I received an email earlier today, I think some of the other candidates did as well, about how hard it is and the lack of transparency to get access to ownership in HDFCs. And gosh, I actually think that's something we can do quite a lot with. The history of this program is in the 70s and 80s when it wasn't a big political giveaway to give people home ownership. And I think now, I think we may be at a similar moment. And if anything, I think we should be expanding it vastly. The lack of stability in this city has a lot to do with lack of home ownership and the lack of ability to make it into the middle class and pass something along to our kids is associated with that. I think the big misnomer is that the big approach to that has been to talk about RAD with NYCHA, which is a very different program, a very different audience, and I think very much the wrong solution. But I think we should be expanding HDFCs. I'd like to work in partnership however I can in a very advocacy-oriented role. I think we need to hold the 1,200 or so buildings where HDFCs exist to much greater account through an audit process, and also ensure that we're actually making it possible for people to gain access to home ownership in HDFCs.
Great, thank you. Elizabeth?
Sure, thanks. So look, I think Manhattan needs to be accessible to all who want to live here. We need to build more affordable units. I know Kim has spoken very outspokenly about this in many of our town halls over past months from her experiences. We need to have housing that preserves units for all income levels. And we need to think about really what the real scope of the Borough President's office is. And a lot of that is zoning. And we need to really think about how we build, how we think about how people are living and moving into the district and into the borough, and how we're looking at the impact In my opinion, the impact of COVID has been throughout this borough over the last year, which has fundamentally changed who's moving in and who's moving out. We need to protect those units. We need to make sure that we're preserving the units that we already have. We need to also make sure that we have a borough president who is uniquely rooted in community boards, who can guide Manhattan through a process that benefits all residents, including those in the middle class, bring them back, not taking away the iconic character of these units that have been, again, I think 1,200 buildings, 25,800 apartments. Any comprehensive plan needs to include HDFCs and needs to make sure that they're prioritized. All people deserve the dignity of a home, and we need a borough president who can navigate this issue with a real, true local experience and the empathy to help make sure that those units are preserved and prevent residents from losing their homes in the future.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. Brad?
Thank you. Let me just also offer my condolences to Ben as well and your family. You know, I would say to start with, you know, we have to recognize that the fact that so many HDFCs are in distress. I think it's around 15%. And we need to stop these third-party transfers, end of story. What I would do as borough president is provide HDFCs technical assistance with the resources to figure out issues like their boards, how to access necessary improvements, keep them out of foreclosure. I'd create, as I said before, an HDFC help center in the borough president's office, a one-stop shop for HDFCs to get assistance. Currently, HDFCs can only basically go to HPD, who doesn't want to deal with them, or the Attorney General, who seems not to want to deal with them. We need to expand their options to get assistance through the Manhattan Borough President's Office. I'd also like to help with dispute resolution and establish a dispute mechanism. The HDFC Help Center could provide them with arbitration and mediation opportunities. Many HDFC co-op board members don't have the resources to go to court. We need to look at tax forgiveness for those HDFCs in default. And I want to get our HDFCs into the New York City Condo and Co-op Association. Why should they be treated any differently? And when it comes to tax abatements, why should a luxury condo on Park Avenue get a different tax treatment than an HDFC co-op? It doesn't really make sense. And we need to help them with a pathway if they want to exit HDFC altogether. And here's another big idea I'd like to pursue. I'd like to create an HDFC Green Fund, leveraging the capital dollars from the borough president's office to institute energy efficient improvements like insulation, upgrades to windows and doors, and low flow plumbing. I think the borough president, as the convener in chief, as well as being the planner in chief, can operate on economies of scales with tenants and co-op and condo owners to make that happen.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much, Brad. Ben Kallos?
Thank you, everyone. April Tyler taught me so much about HFCs. I'm so sorry that we lost her out of the blue so soon. It seems like a lot of bad things can happen at once. I want to thank Kim Watkins as the only HDFC homeowner in this race who's really elevating issues of education and affordable homeownership that I think would have been missing from the dialogue without her. And the borough owes a huge debt of gratitude for that. Thank you, Kim, you're awesome. As I mentioned, we're opening new HDFCs in my districts with apartments on the Upper East Side starting at $23,000. And I think that we can expand that model beyond my district. That's part of why I'm running. I've been fighting for the tenant interim lease, the TILs in my district, because HPD has been throwing everything at them and trying to take away their homes. And I wasn't going to let them. I was chair of a committee that had oversight over some of the third-party transfer. And when I saw that they were taking homeownership away from people, I was like, what is this? This is wrong. And I actually blew the whistle on it, on the whole third-party transfer thing, because they were taking properties away from homeowners, giving it to real estate developers who had given money to elected officials. It's one of the reasons I don't take money from real estate developers. And we were able to stop a lot of the third-party transfer that they were trying to do, particularly in Manhattan, not so much in Brooklyn. We're still trying to fix it. And I also just want to mention that Mark Levine has been a champion for HDFC, somebody I've been proud to work with in the council. There's a lot of broken politics about how we can do legislation in the council, and it caused some issues, but ultimately we were able to get to the right place and protect folks from third-party transfer and really invest in our HDFCs. We've got embarrassment of riches people running for borough president, but I think we'll be able to work together to get a lot done for you.
Great, fantastic. Mark.
Thanks, Mike. And thank you, Ben, for those really kind words. Much appreciated. And I know you care a lot about this sector. And thank you for that. Look, as borough president, I would start by using the bully pulpit to make the case very clearly that 75% or more, the vast majority of HDFCs are succeeding. And what you need is for the city not to mess you up. You don't need well-run HDFCs to have a monitor imposed on you. You don't need to have restrictions on who you can hire as a management company. That threat's been coming at you. It's a one-size-fits-all approach that could actually harm successful co-ops. And so I would use my bully pulpit to fight against that. Of course, the borough president can introduce legislation. And if necessary, I would introduce legislation to beat back threats as I have in the past. For individual co-ops, which are struggling because they have water payments and back taxes, this happens. I'll get on the phone with the finance commissioner, with the commissioner of DEP, with the mayor if I have to, as I have for HDFCs in my district as a council member, and make sure there's a workout that is reasonable, that will allow that housing to remain as home ownership. I will use the power of the office to do that. And I want to thank you, Cheryl, for asking about new HDFCs. And I think everyone shares the goal of bringing more people into the movement of affordable home ownership. And we have to acknowledge that the ANCP program, which is the current model, has real problems and is saddling some of these buildings with unreasonable debts from day one. And so I'm really proud that I have partnered with the current amazing borough president, Gail Brewer, to put millions of dollars into one building, 615 West 150th Street, to make sure they could come into ownership debt-free. And I'll use the capital in the borough president's office if I'm lucky enough to have that job to continue to do that for other buildings. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful, Mark. Kim.
That was incredible timing. Thank you, everyone, for being so kind of tight around this issue, because I think Elizabeth is right. Where everyone has great ideas about how to capitalize on a concept that is meant to work in this time, this day and age, where we really know, especially in New York City, that the concept of the American dream and there being like a piece of property with a yard and a fence, that's not what's happening in Manhattan. The co-op, the sort of village ownership, the equity stake in a building where you know your neighbors and you stay a really long time and you have motorcycles out your window all the time, is really what HDFC should be best known for, and we have to do everything that we can to protect it. There are a lot of great things already mentioned, but I definitely believe, as some of the others have stated, first and foremost, we need to make sure that tax incentives for HDFCs are progressive, not regressive. They're not harming owners and preventing us from being able to do the work of maintaining a residence, of building as a group. I also agree very much that we need to incentivize HDFCs with things like solar panels, rainwater runoff programs, and components of a green unit that would allow the properties to maintain their value, especially as they move from generation to generation. And I want to use the borough president's office as well to make sure that we have a much more streamlined approach to protecting those HDFCs that need help. As someone in that space right now, and with a solvent organization and people doing the sweat equity work meeting once a month, we're still struggling to make sure that we dot all of our I's and cross all of our T's. And when it comes to all the regulations, it's essential that we have attorneys working with us and our management company working with us. If you're not already, I got you, Bruce, you're not really equipped to do that, then you struggle. And I want to make sure we do that.
Great. Thank you so much, Kim. And Cheryl will be back to ask the last question. And I'm moving on to the second one. The Manhattan Borough President plays a crucial role in the city's political pecking order. Its most prominent role is to voice he or she a voice to land issues and development decisions. There are many agencies with which HDFC homeowners must interact. Chief among them is the Department of Finance and the Department of Environmental Protection to pay property tax and water and sewer charges respectively, and also with HPD, the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, the city's supervisory agency and the creator enforcer of housing policies, programs, and regulations. All too often, these agencies promote policies that are antithetical to the success and autonomy of HDFCs. What specifically would your office do to advocate for the concerns of HDFCs before these agencies? For example, with regard to third-party transfers or TPT programs, and especially the existing and proposed regulatory agreements, also known as RAs. And first, again, going back to alphabetical order here, or shall we change it up? Shall we do reverse alphabetical order? Kim?
Thank you. Wow. So the truth of the matter is that that all of the combination of all of the different agencies is kind of where I ended the last part of my discussion, right? And that as an owner, as a co-op board member, what we struggle with is volunteer organizations that are in low income neighborhoods. So many of my board members and I are working multiple jobs, and we have families, and we're struggling to even pay, attention to all of the details. So we need a conduit through which we can work with the government, and the borough president's office is a perfect place for this. To help us to steward, really, to provide a stewardship through all of the different regulations in order to make sure that the quality of life for the board members is not quite so overwhelming, because it is a lot of work. I think another aspect of it is education. I think changing hearts and minds about the concept of being a participant in a cooperative building is anathema a little bit to the way the American sort of thinking goes around. You have your space and you're concerned about your own existence, and that's it. In order to participate, to succeed in this kind of program, we really need to lift up the spirit of community living and get back to the idea that when everyone chips in a little bit, we all have a much more higher quality of life and a much more productive relationship when it comes to the government. The last thing that I would say is I think we need to be on the ready with legal action where that's necessary. We need to have an office prepared to take the various agencies of the city to court when the relationship is starting to sour, and I have seen that as well.
Great, thank you, Kim. Mark Levine.
Well, thank you, Mike. My district has faced a real threat from third-party transfers. We've had 24 or more that have been put on the list for third-party transfer by HPD, which would have meant the dream of home ownership evaporating for hundreds of families uptown. And I have moved heaven and earth to save these buildings, one by one, with intensive work. On the phone with the relevant agencies. Many of you have worked with my staff on these. It's required workouts with DOF and with DEP and sometimes other agencies We've gone the extra mile at 526 West 158th. We're getting them an HDFC friendly Article 11 and probably low-cost financing as well. Whatever it takes for those buildings that want it to remain homeowners. And out of the 24, I'm incredibly proud that all 23 who wanted to be off the list, we have succeeded in removing from that threat. There's one building where there were no shareholders left that they actually opted to go through to become a rental building, and we supported that. But we have an unbroken record of success on that front. And when there were policy threats that would have impacted many of your buildings, even those that are not struggling financially, I've mobilized. I went in on day one and talked to the deputy mayor and explained why the kinds of regulatory agreements, not kinds of the regulatory agreement reform that they were proposing had serious flaws that through a one-size-fits-all approach would have actually harmed successful co-ops and would have meant that some people who had spent their life accumulating a little bit of a nest egg after decades of hard work would have lost it. And even some would have had mortgages underwater. Wouldn't have been acceptable. And we succeeded and have beat back that misguided proposal. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mark. And I just want to make a brief announcement that Hannah is actually translating the words spoken tonight in the chat room. So please, lo que quieren escuchar lo que están diciendo en inglés, por favor, de oprimir el cuarto de chat, y Hannah Leo lo está escribiendo ahí en español, lo que están diciendo aquí en inglés. Okay, very good. So next is Ben Kallos.
Thank you. Everything Mark said is true. And I can vouch for him because we wouldn't let any of the TPTs go without checking in with the landlords, not the landlords, with the homeowners and the members of the HDFC. And so that was, in the one case, a piece which was difficult, but it was what the residents asked for. I want to be clear about what's going on for you and the HDFCs. Billionaires and millionaires are getting tax breaks and land for free and your homes for free. Politicians have been taking thousands in contributions from them to sell you out. And residents like us, we've been paying for it all. And that's why I've never taken real estate money. It's why I wrote the new campaign finance system, so that anyone can run free of the corrupting influence of this money, and so that we can elect a new city council and borough president free of that corrupting influence. I want to dig in on third-party transfer. So they take home ownership away from HDFCs. They give it to a real estate developer who's given money to a politician. They sell the building for free or $1. They eliminate the taxes and water bills. And so what I've said from the very beginning is we should just offer HDFC owners amnesty and move on. For DOF and DEP, we've gone after HDFCs. I can tell you when they went after churches, synagogues, and nonprofits, we changed the law so they couldn't go after our nonprofits and faith-based institutions anymore. We need to do the same for HDFCs. When it comes to HPD, if you talk to anyone who lives in an HDFC, and that's all of you, you say, feels like HPD is not really there to help us. It seems like they're trying to force us into privatization. And that's why I think we need to split HPD into two different agencies. I don't know how you can have a agency that does both preservation and development. They need to pick a side, and they need to stop taking preservation and using that as a means of forcing people into development. And so I want to split it and make sure preservation is preservation. I'll work with every HDFC to fight HPD no matter what.
Very good. Thank you, Ben. Brad Hoylman.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the borough president's office has great promise to be that middle person between city agencies and HDFC, between the Attorney General's office and HDFCs, and banks and HDFCs. That's why I'm proposing something that's systemic in the office to address a problem that's systemic with HDFCs. We can't just have one-off solutions. We really need to have an actual organized role in the borough president's office, and that's what I propose. I really do appreciate the city council's investigation and in recent years of of the issue of third-party transfers. And I mean, what's shocking is when you learn that an HDFC, owners could have their home taken out from under them for a $4,000 water bill. And that's unacceptable. And that's something that I think an HDFC help center and providing arbitration and mediation services as well could be helpful. It's about self-governance. It's about giving HDFCs the freedom to operate without unnecessary government restrictions and especially taxes. But for those that are struggling, they need a leg up, and that's where the margins we've seen, particularly in communities of color, where HDFCs need the technical assistance that I'd be eager to provide through the Office of the Borough President. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Brad. Brad, are you staying on? You said you had a hard out at 7:30. Are you going to stay on?
That hard out is now becoming softer because I'm enjoying this conversation so much. I don't know. I'm supposed to be on a panel talking about the demise of Governor Cuomo. So I think I can.
This is much more interesting and
Exactly.
much more important for our HDFC shareholders. Elizabeth.
Sure. So thanks. So I'll be brief on this, but it's very important. Obviously, as a long-term community board chair, I've dealt with this issue for many, many years. I do think the TPT, it's a huge issue that impacts especially families uptown. What we need again is qualified new leadership here. I really respect and think the work of the city council has been great, but we have to do more. We have to focus on the vacant and the occupied multifamily properties in order to improve and preserve housing affordability, making sure that low and moderate income households are protected. I've spent my whole career building bridges. We need to have, again, this sort of new leadership of people who bridge 25 years. I spent my entire career working in municipal infrastructure finance, including housing finance. So I know how these constructions and how these buildings get built and financed. And again, I think we need, again, given what's going on in the city right now, the right type of leadership who can bridge those communities. And I guess just as a final thing, I feel like in terms of what we're doing on the zoning and ULIP process, I want to focus this conversation tonight a little bit more on what the borough president actually does. And Manhattan is growing. We know that it's going to grow. It's going to grow even more, I believe, because I'm a big believer and a cheerleader for Manhattan. We all believe it's a bully pulpit, but we know that this city is going to grow despite the pandemic, and we're going to come back. And we need to make sure that we're ensuring an increased number of affordable units, both for rentals and for home ownership. We need to make sure that we're looking at how we develop, and we need to make sure we make responsible changes to the zoning process. And that to me is something that is a critical feature of the borough president's office, and something I would work with all of you on as we think about how we look at how we build and where people live in the city. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. Lindsey.
So, I appreciate Councilman Levine's advocacy, and a lot of HDFCs are in Upper Manhattan and it's just Lower East Side. I appreciate Kim's very tactical, really important experience. I agree with Councilman Kallos's relief that we should provide instead of third-party transfers and pushing people in that direction. The only thing I would add is I've been pretty shocked at the misunderstanding, even a lot of my progressive colleagues and our progressive community has on the idea of homeownership. And I think this was brought up very poignantly in the mayor's attempt to do the tax lien sale for small property owners. And I say that because I find myself having to argue with people who I agree with on everything else, and they just don't understand the importance of home ownership in multi-generational opportunity, stability, opportunity to get into the middle class more broadly. And then what I say is, hey, listen, if you if you take away the opportunity for home ownership for people, you're just creating more opportunity for REITs and big real estate. And I think we've heard that conversation throughout the evening. I have my entire career and more recently overseeing all of housing and economic development for the state. I've worked interagency, but I think some of the biggest work we have to do is at home on this particular issue, because all of us here understand the value of HDFCs. But I don't think that our broader community, particularly in a borough that has such high rental rates, understands the importance on a policy level and an advocacy level when we're going to have an opportunity to increase the opportunities for homeownership. I don't think people get it, and I think we have a lot of work to do on that. And I want to do that work because I think what we saw in the financial crisis was that who lost? It wasn't the banks. It was homeowners who had invested all of their wealth, so to speak, and opportunity and what they intended to pass along to their kids, like my parents, because of other people playing in people's lives with respect to homeownership and housing. And I think we have a lot of work to do, and we have a lot of opportunity in this moment, given what's going to be happening in the city and especially Manhattan. So I'm excited about that opportunity, and I don't disagree with my colleagues that I mentioned specifically.
Great, thank you, Lindsey. Now with this next questions, we're gonna get into the weeds a little bit. HPD's Division of Alternative Management Programs, or DAMP, partial tax exemption for HDFC cooperatives is necessary to keep HDFCs not only affordable, but to prevent financial distress and possible foreclosure. The DAMP tax break for HDFC was created in 1989, and it will expire in 2029. If a replacement for tax breaks for HDFCs is not addressed at the state level through an amendment of the private housing finance law, it will likely fall to the city. What is your position on the need to renew or replace the DAMP tax break for HDFCs? And what do you see as a viable replacement for this tax break that keeps HDFCs both affordable and financially stable? And with that, I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to start with Brad Hoylman.
Thank you. Yes, we are definitely in the weeds here, but such an important issue, and I really do appreciate you focusing on it, because the de Blasio plans, from a few years ago to require HDFCs to hire monitors and set limits on sale prices as a condition to receive DAMP tax breaks was just unacceptable, unfair, and not supportive of the overall concept of self-governance and affordability. So I reject that, certainly. I default would look to extend the DAMP tax breaks, which are expiring soon, of course, in 2029, as you said. But besides that, I like the idea of working with the HDFC coalition and coming up with an alternative from the ground up, not imposed on co-ops, but from the ground up. And that's, I think, again, the borough president being convener in chief can do that. I do like the legislation. I read it closely that you've proposed. I don't know who's carrying it in Albany, but the idea as an alternative to DAMP is a good one, that you would provide the tax incentives to keep people, to keep co-ops in the program. That's a much better alternative than what the de Blasio team has proposed. So I'd work with you closely on crafting new legislation. And I'd like to say, I'd like to think one of the things I bring to the table is that I have those relationships in Albany, in the Senate and the Assembly. And not, only will I be introducing legislation at the city council level, I'll be working with colleagues in Albany if we have to take that route to do it there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Brad. Ben Kallos.
This one makes me think a lot about April Tyler, and actually, Michael Palma, I think you were in a meeting where we kind of dug into this. That we're not in the weeds. We're way into the roots here, and everyone in the HDFC coalition is just so knowledgeable when it comes to things that no one else would understand so much. It's amazing. So There's a huge misunderstanding that folks need to come to grips with, which is when we talk about affordable housing modern day, there's these lotteries and you literally have to win the lottery. And what many of you have been through is people abandoned their buildings. You were left with buildings that you had to maintain, take care of on your own. And you've been on your own for so very long with this investment that continues to this day. An agency that runs up your bills for no reason and says they do work that doesn't. And one of the things that was incredibly frustrating is that the DAMP wasn't being available. They weren't making generous tax benefits available. And they were trying to do Article 11, force everyone to these regulatory agreements, trying to force things into third-party transfer, and just taking away your rights as owners. And so we need to do whatever we can to make sure that we respect the fact that you own these homes, that you're entitled to enjoy them, that you're entitled to keep them, and that the city shouldn't be continuing to try to steal them away from you. So of course, whatever we can do in Albany and here in the city, I'd be a strong advocate as borough president to make sure that whatever we were giving you didn't come with strings attached. We need to honor your right to self-regulate just as any other cooperative owner in the city. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Lindsay.
So I agree very much with Ben on this. What I would say, and I had the distinct pleasure of running the budget table for some portion of housing when I worked in Albany. Specifically, it was related to NYCHA funding, so it was not related to issues of homeownership and HDFCs. I got to go back to the comment I just made about the political awareness and the importance of homeownership and HDFCs. We now have the state assembly and we have the state senate, and it's going to be city leaders that will have to be city leaders at the state level that will have to be carrying this. And I think there's a lot more education that has to go into the importance of HDFCs and the importance of expanding them in this moment in time, and the importance of homeownership, because I just don't think that we're there yet with the political capital. As I said, I'm a progressive, and I find myself having to do this educational work pretty frequently, and I want to do that, but I think we got some work to do on that front, and I think the work has to be done at the state level. I did run the budget table for portions of housing and economic development. I like to think I have very good relationships with most of Albany. Maybe there are one or two folks that I don't any longer, but I would be excited to do that work, and I consider Albany, even when I'm borough president, to be part of the advocacy and the work, because it's all interconnected, right?
Mm-hmm. Very good. Yes, they are. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Kim Watkins.
Thank you so much. I agree with so much of what has already been said about DAMP, about sort of self-determination. And as one of the members here one of the candidates here that is not already an elected official, not writing legislation, I did read the bill, and I'm such a big fan of sort of taking matters into your own hands, being the masters of our own destiny, because that's the strength of the community that is really the basis of the program from the beginning. But I think one of the things that I want to make sure I mention is that it's we have two levels, two phases of pernicious behavior that started with the very beginning of this, of the creation of the programs, right? Where the city wanted to unload properties. And then now it's the idea of the sort of promoting affordable housing and creating the veneer of saying that you're supporting it by then making it harder for the self-determination, the sort of self-reliance and oversight to actually work in an organic fashion. So I think that we need to push through this bill at the state level, and we need to protect it with everything we've got. And I'm, as next borough president, that will be one of the top priorities that I have. I've talked about home ownership at many points during the campaign because I'm a member of an HDFC, and because I truly believe that in urban living, the concept of the rent landlord relationship is really coming and going. We've got to rethink the way that we propagate and keep people here as residents of Manhattan, and it can't just be luxury rental spaces and really wealthy people. So I think my time is up.
Thank you very much, Kim.
Michael, could you please remind people they can type in their questions and how they should do that, because we need to get questions in advance of that segment. Thank you.
Sure. The second half of this
I
webinar will be.
wasn't asked to answer yet. So do I have a second answer?
Yes, you will. I'm just making a very brief announcement that we will be fielding questions from attendees. So please write your questions in the chat, and then the moderators for the Q&A will put forth your
Do
questions.
the questions go into the chat or the Q&A section?
In the Q&A section. I'm sorry, I didn't know there was a Q&A button.
At the bottom of the screen, right? Next
Bottom of
to
the
raise
screen, there's
hand.
a Q&A button. Please put your questions in the Q&A.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Elizabeth.
Oh, no worries at all. Thanks for doing the round robin on this. Look, I agree with most of what's been said. The damp tax break needs to be renewed. I do bring something a little different to the conversation. I have spent my entire career and my time running a community board dealing with people oftentimes who don't agree with me. And I think what's really going to be important for the next borough president is somebody who has the executive experience to stand in front of a room of several hundred people and have them shout at you and tell you that they may or may not agree with you on something, and be able to be that person who's able to forge consensus. So related to this issue, when it comes to the tax break and the damp issue, I will do everything in my power to maintain existing affordable housing in New York City, especially with low income or lower income individuals. They should not be shut out of home ownership. And the tax break really helps keep these HDFCs affordable. And I want to see them become even more affordable, and something that I would champion. Again, that goes to the first pillar of what the borough president does, which is being the bully pulpit. So I am in favor also separately of establishing price caps and tightening income restrictions on resales in exchange for the city providing a more substantial tax subsidy to help maintain HDFCs as an affordable city resource. So I just wanted to make sure I said that tonight. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you for doing just that. And Mark Levine.
Thank you, Mike.
Sure.
Well, the DAMP program has to be replaced by an exemption, which is going to maintain the financial integrity of HDFCs as cooperatives and of HDFC shareholders as individual families. 2029 in housing finance terms is actually pretty close. This deadline is looming. And so we have to figure this out now. And we really need the city and state to stop using this as a sword of Damocles hanging over the head of the HDFC movement. Really, their approach has been all stick and no carrot until now. And they're using the looming threat of this expiration to try and force some regulatory agreements that would just dramatically upend the financial integrity of some of the families, of the shareholders and the buildings. And that's just not fair. There were rules of the game established when DAMP was first enacted, when many of you first became shareholders. You've played by those rules. You've worked your heart out. You have brought buildings back to life. You brought whole blocks and neighborhoods back to life. You've got nothing in return for that. And all you've asked is to be able to have a home where you can build a little bit of a financial nest egg, and not much in the vast majority of cases. And for DAMP to be allowed to expire, and for you to be forced into regulatory agreements which would disrupt that as the price for some sort of successor program is not acceptable. And there should be carrots offered if HPD or the state wants changes to the regulatory agreement that you can opt into, but it shouldn't be done in a way that puts you in an impossible position, and I will fight for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Now, last but not least, the fourth question, and Cheryl, I'm turning it over to Cheryl. And Cheryl, do you want to also do your round robin directly to the candidates? Or would you like me to continue to do it?
No, that's okay. I can do that.
Okay, great, fantastic.
Okay, so lastly, the COVID-19 pandemic has threatened the financial stability of many HDFC shareholders and their buildings. There is, however, no specific assistance or relief efforts for the residents or HDFC cooperatives. How can you constructively use your current office and your bully pulpit as a candidate to change this now? And the emphasis is on now. Given that we have already established the importance of HDFC as neighborhood anchors for community development, how would you address this issue if you were elected as Manhattan Borough President? Okay, and I'm going to go with Ben.
Thank you. I'll try to make it quick because I think we're a little bit over, and I know Brad has places to be. I think Mark already led with the answer. As somebody who represents so many of the HDFCs, he's been personally investing along with Gail Brewer. I don't have that same luxury. We can put our money where our mouth is. We can put capital funds into our HDFCs and make sure that you have the resources you need to. There's a plague of sidewalk sheds all over our city. There's actually 300 miles of it. And it's because a lot of folks, some landlords are doing it just to mess with their tenants and force rent regulated tenants out, but many others just can't afford to do the work, so the sidewalk sheds stay up. And so something that I've been pushing for years at this point is that if a landowner can't make the repairs, if they can't afford it, the city should step in, make funds available, particularly to make it affordable. Or if it's affordable housing, just step in and help and do the work. We can't live in a city where our buildings are literally crumbling, where they're crumbling onto our heads and where bricks are falling off buildings and killing us. We have a responsibility to maintain these buildings. And if the owners are not in a position to do so, we have to step in and do it ourselves. That's why I proposed a grant and fund and why HPD should be doing that work. And then if the building can pay, we should do so. If it's an affordable housing development, the city should eat the cost and just cover it, get it done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Brad.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Well, what I'm doing right now, and I know you wrote now all in caps, so I get it. Right now, we've been in Albany doing a few things. One is we're trying to raise revenue. It's so important. We have this budget that's been cut for during the entire tenure of this current administration. We haven't yet recovered from the 2009 recession, and it's a real shame that so many housing programs have been cut too, along with, of course, our schools and mass transit and support for the vulnerable, including our seniors. We're trying to raise taxes on the wealthy, increasing the personal income tax, trying to claw back the Trump tax cuts that could generate up to $9 billion a year if we brought them back up to 2017 levels. And of course, as I mentioned before, the pied-à-terre tax, which would tax luxury second and third homes worth $5 billion or more. Wouldn't it be nice to have a co-op at that value? But they're paying the same effective tax rate, those owners, as a single family homeowner in Queens, and that's simply not right. But I'm also fighting for state funding for the homeowner protection program, along with Senator Brian Kavanaugh. We're leading the effort in the Senate to include a new $20 million in funding for the program in this year's state budget. And those funds should be directed to assist HDFC owners to avoid foreclosure. These kinds of funds are used for nonprofit, free housing counseling, and legal service providers. And also I commit, using my Senate office now, capital NOW, as a resource to connect HDFC owners facing foreclosure with the homeowner protection program services. So thank you so much. I am going to have to jump off. Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'm sorry I double booked myself. Elizabeth, have a great anniversary. And it's good to see all my colleagues. And thank you so much.
Thank you,
Honored
Brad.
to be here. Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right. Okay, let's hear from Mark Levine next.
Thank you. Well, first in my chair's capacity of the City Council Health Committee, I'm doing everything I can to fight this pandemic, and a pandemic which is not yet over, though there's great news on the horizon for the months ahead. But fighting to make sure this public health crisis finally gets to the point where it doesn't dominate our lives. But there is real serious financial impact on a lot of shareholders who, like New Yorkers all over the city, some of whom have lost their livelihood and have not been able to make maintenance payments, for example. And that's impacted some of the HDFC as cooperatives. And so, like just almost every other element of life in the city right now, there's a real financial impact. And there has been a lot of talk of rent relief for tenants, as well there should be, and we need it. And there's been talk of help, kind of mortgage relief or mortgage moratorium on homeowners, but neither of that really meets the unique needs of HDFC shareholders. And so there needs to be some sort of program to infuse, we're talking basically a one-shot deal to make co-ops whole coming out of the pandemic. And by the scale of the other challenges I just described, this is a very, very small amount of money. The state could do it. It would potentially the city could as well. We'd love to fight with you for that. And just in my remaining second, so I have a board seat on the West Harlem Development Corp, and they are launching an HDFC assistance center that I hope and expect will offer some financial assistance, things like low interest loans and technical assistance and more. That could be an immediate help in some cases. Thanks very much, Shel.
Thank you. Elizabeth, you can go next. Elizabeth, thank you.
Excellent, thanks. Thanks for that. I agree with most of what's already been said. Specific to this last question, I mean, our renters and homeowners obviously need relief all across the board. Rather than focus on, what can be done, which I have a plan for, we also need to look at what hasn't been done. And I intend on using my vote on the city budget to insist on housing support, to appropriately direct state and federal aid, which is crucially important right now. And we need to use the capital funds in the Borough President's office to support more affordable housing, both for owners and also for renters. My entire career has been built on bridges. And I just want to say that I think that it's really important tonight that we look at the records of everyone, what they've done and what they can do. And as president, I believe very strongly in the work I've done at the community board level to promote affordable housing at every level and make sure that we ensure that throughout all 12 community board districts in Manhattan. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulty with my video. Let's see. Okay, it's back on now. I don't know what happened.
I thought I was sort of done, but my only other thing was that racial, economic, and social justice needs to be a big part of anything we talk about. And we haven't spent a ton of time tonight talking about that. I want to make sure we do that in future conversations. And again, I'm grateful for your time. So thanks.
Okay, thank you for making that addition. Again, my video. Okay, let's go to Kim.
Thank you. As others were talking, one of the things that I realized is that it astounds me to think about the fact that if you're a really big guy, sort of the big corporation, a luxury developer, a wealthy real estate investment corporation, you had access to PPP and sort of the wherewithal to get access to federal funds that helped offset some of the some of what was happening and is still happening in our HDFCs. We're down tens of thousands of dollars in maintenance fees, and because we have no relief, my particular board, we are suffering. We are going into our into some of our savings in order to make sure that we have the ability to continue paying our bills every month. It is really, really an unfortunate situation, but the reality is that many of the reasons why people are not able to pay their maintenance fees in my building, where 3 of our members, and we're in a small 31 unit building, 3 members died of COVID this year. And so, I think relief, amnesty from some of these, some of the bills, and some of the relief that we need to focus on to bring HDFCs into solvency that have been suffering through the pandemic, it should be top of line. I totally agree with Elizabeth about the budget and making sure that we prioritize the individual organizations that are helping home ownership stay alive in our city, where so many people are not able to benefit from the program. And I'll end it there because I think we have closing statements, but I'm also in agreement with Elizabeth about talking a little more about how the program itself and how the oppressive regulations are really racially sort of steeped in racism and power privilege, hoarding, and gender bias. Quite frankly, I'm excited to talk about that in my closing.
Okay, thank you very much. Did Lindsay, you went?
No, I didn't.
Lindsay, that's
I'll
right.
be
That was
quick.
Lindsay. No,
I'll be quick.
2 minutes, take your full 2 minutes.
I would say I agree with kind of Mark's thrust of his comments on this. We have the tenants' support. We have, funds that will bail out bigger developers and bigger property owners. But in the middle of all this is HDFCs and smaller property owners. I think the only thing I would add that I don't think has been emphasized tonight is the influx of federal funds we're going to be getting. And there's going to be a huge hungry hippo game for who gets that and how that works. And I think part of that goes back to my comments earlier about making the case for how important how important HDFCs are in the city, how important home ownership is. Actually increasing this is a huge opportunity. So I would just say I'll be looking at the federal funds here, and that ends up being the same issue when we talk about things like small business services. When I oversaw economic development and small business services, even housing programs, a lot of these are federal funds that even run through the state and city government. So follow the money up to the federal government and make the case in Albany and in New York City to whomever we need to, regardless of whatever that political environment is going to be like a few weeks or a few months from now.
Okay. Thank you very much. I guess now, Michael, we can have everybody make closing statements. Or no, in fact, do you want them to take the Q&A and then?
Well, we're gonna have, yes. I hate to keep you on but just for a little bit, hang in there for just a little bit longer. We do want to have an opportunity for HDFC shareholders to ask you questions directly. And to do that, I'm going to hand this off to John McBride and Tina DeFelicia Antonio. John and Tina?
I'm going to let Tina lead, but I'll be happy to assist.
Great, there she is.
We
Okay,
need to do a layup.
great.
Okay, right. So this is a little long, but important. Okay, so in the last few years, the few HDFCs that seek and actually receive the very limited grants or loans that are available from HPD, these buildings have been required to sign a regulatory agreement that I think most, if not all, individuals who are aware of it consider onerous because it severely limits our rights as homeowners and effectively converts private homes into public housing. I think some mention was made over dictates to have monitors and all this other stuff. It even gets down to that, how do you manage the board, kind of nitty gritty. The majority of shareholders are elderly, immigrants, and or people of color who invested their own funds and sweat equity over decades to rehab houses and communities that were often overlooked at best and redlined at worst. So the question really has to do with honoring the HDFC shareholders who have worked so hard to create and maintain this housing stock. And do you feel that you can work with us, the shareholders, related city and state representatives, to push HPD to halt onerous regulatory agreements immediately because they effectively steal homes of shareholders. How aware are people of these specific regulatory agreements? And I know they vary amongst different kinds of units and so forth, but I really think it's antithetical to, this is me pontificating, to say you're going to help folks, but what do you want, cut off your right or your left hand? So what are your feelings about the regulatory agreement as written and the fairness that that the government has? It's like, if they're going to help us, this is what what you need to do for us. You need to put yourself in jail. So, Mark.
Okay. Well, what you just described is kind of an immediate version of the same sort of impossible bargain that the movement as a whole is facing with the expiration of DAM in 2029. It's putting buildings and shelters in a situation where they have just an impossible choice of either crashing entirely out of the program because of financial distress, or taking a financial rescue that comes with terms and conditions that are so onerous that it undermines the spirit of the program and the basic promise that they were offered when they became shareholders, in some cases decades ago, and have done just incredible work in the years since, as you described. And there needs to be a better way where this kind of emergency rescue is designed to make co-ops whole, to bring them out of financial distress, but to maintain the spirit of the program without these kind of onerous impositions that some of which I talked about before and others have talked about before, with the monitors and the requiring sign off on every single business decision that the co-op makes. Again, it's just using only sticks to force changes to the regulatory agreement, which really violate the spirit of HDFCs. I've fought against this in a number of cases in my district, and certainly with the power of the bully pulpit of the borough presidency would do it on a bigger scale. Thank you, Tina.
Okay, Elizabeth.
Sure, and I apologize. I have, again, as I mentioned, I have my 10th anniversary with my partner Jose tonight, so we are heading out soon. And I look forward to staying in touch with you. You can go to elizabethcaputo.com anytime to learn more about our campaign and how we're going to build back Manhattan. I would just go back to what I said earlier, that I support what most people have said tonight on the damp tax break. It needs renewed. The tax needs the break needs renewed. And I'm going to do everything in my power to maintain existing affordable housing in New York City. I have a track record of doing that, from having been an executive, both in the private sector and in the public sector, from having run a community board, from having been somebody who has bridged US cities to the world. And there is nobody who's going to be a bigger champion for making sure that at all levels of people's economic status, we provide them with financial stability and affordable housing that they deserve. And you'll be hearing more again on my website, but I just wanted to make sure you all knew how excited I was to talk to you tonight, and look forward to staying in touch with you in the coming days and months. As I said before, again, I said the establishment of a price cap, the income restrictions on resales is something I care a lot about, despite not using my Harvard degrees for much. I do know a little bit about housing and about home ownership, even though I'm not one myself. And I think there needs to be somebody who can be there, who can be an executive in charge of making sure that we make things safer, cleaner, greener, and more equitable for the entire borough. So again, I look forward to talking to you in the coming days, and I'm really grateful for your time tonight. And again, it's elizabethcaputo.com. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Have a great
Thanks. We're gonna go enjoy the outdoor dining while it's still a little bit warm out.
Got a good weekend, and we might,
Thank you guys.
might ask you specifically about your perspective on price caps, because it's something that everyone's really interested. So we'll be back in touch with you directly.
Thank you very much. And it's Elizabeth at elizabethcaputo.com. I'm happy to talk to you, go deep into the policy. So thank you very much. Have a great night, everyone.
All right, we gotcha. All right, Ben, again, I think everyone feels, very sorrowful that you recently lost your mother, and we appreciate you. And we just need to have you turn back your mic on. There we go.
Thank you, everyone, for the condolences. And I'm going to make this really short, less than a minute, because I know all of us have places to be, whether it's Liz or Brad, or I was planning to spend time with my family a little bit. And my wife is being incredibly generous in terms of dinner is now ready, and she has started to eat without me, and I will work on better timing these. So 30 seconds, I would just say yes to everything you just said, asked and answered. And as a council member, as a borough president, they should not be trying to pile on the debt, pile on the taxes, pile on the water bills, use HPD to force work that wasn't supposed to be done and never needed to be done, and then they never did, and then try to take your self-determination agency away. And it's something that they don't do to any of the private developers, they don't do to any nonprofit profit developers, and it needs to end. It's something I would lead. I'm over my minute.
Thank you. And Lindsey.
Hi. So, my favorite part about being a public servant is being a good partner. I haven't had a chance to be the partner of HDFCs and shareholders specifically, but I was a real pain in the ass for the MTA when I worked at state. And that's kind of the best part about being a public servant, I think, is listening. I don't know the onerousness of some of the mandates that are thrust upon shareholders, but I'd like to listen and be a good pain in the ass and make some good trouble. And I'm pretty good at doing that. And I think it would be fun to work together. And I'm a good listener. So I'd like to do that.
Great, thank you. And Kim.
Thank you, Tina. So, I think the thing that's worth mentioning is going back to the kind of concept of why all this got started in the first place. In our city in the 60s, and then in the 70s, again in the 80s and the 90s. There are different periods of time in which the city wanted to unload buildings to residents, make them private. When big developers, build a building, yes, of course there are regulations, but are they regulated to the oppressive degree that the small organization, the small buildings and low income and minority communities have to deal with without lawyers, without a lot of business associates that kind of navigate all of the different details? No, of course not, because the big organizations have everything that they need at the ready in order to make sure that they can comply with different requests, pay their bills, and they get the assistance that they need because they know how to navigate the systems. But when you're a small organization, such as the one that I'm in, and many of you are, we are really exhausted by the regulations, and we absolutely should get rid of them to the best extent that we can, to the fullest extent that we can, in order to stabilize the environment and then to promulgate a new and sort of better way of thinking about, as I said before, about urban living, where we can really change the kind of dynamic in communities where the strength of the community has been lost by the, sorry, that was my puppy barking, by the sort of individualistic living that really the relationship between the tenant and the landlord doesn't promote the symbiosis that helps keep a building strong and make sure that it stays, it passes on to next generations through time. So I'm all for it. Long way of saying yes.
All right, thank you. My family's starting to eat in the background too, so I'm trying to mute. So John, I think you had a question from one of the participants, viewers.
Yes. Am I visible? Okay, great. Okay, so we have a quick question about taxes and water sewer charges. that was sent in. Following up on the previous question, when HDFCs fall into arrears on real estate taxes and water sewer charges, they face numerous penalties and very high interest rates, making it difficult or even impossible to pay off their back taxes and water bills. Paying these penalties and high interest rates takes funds away from what would otherwise go to making repairs and capital improvements on the building to keep it safe. Do you think these high penalties and interest rates should be applied to affordable housing, such as HDFCs? How will you work with the HDFC coalition and city and state representatives to lower these interest rates and penalties so that home ownership and specifically affordable home ownership can be preserved? Let's see who's first. I see Kim right there is in the first window, so I guess I can go to her and we'll go through everyone else.
Yeah, that was a really long question.
Sorry.
I think getting into the depths of that level of assistance, right? Sitting around, getting together with people, hopefully not in a Zoom forever, but working with leaders in your organization, leaders in different communities where clusters of HDFCs are typically. There must be ways to either to negotiate penalties that are more realistic for buildings to pay if they are indeed in that much of arrears, but also have a plan for forgiveness and amnesty where necessary, especially coming out of COVID, where we know that lives lost and the trauma of the pandemic has really saddled this particular sector to a great degree. And it will take many years for my neighbors and many of my other Harlem neighbors to get back to work, to feel as though they're thriving again. So I think this is an opportune time to get to negotiate those kinds of initiatives in order to help save this program and ensure that it continues to thrive.
Okay, thank you. And I see the next window would be in front of me is Lindsey Boylan, if she's ready. Would you like to unmute, Lindsey?
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
I'm ready. I think I would just back up what Kim has said. I would like to work very closely. I think an amnesty, frankly. I mean, I live just south of Hudson Yards, and how many deep incentives, Empire Zones, MRF, all of these things, all these incentives were put into large scale development that supposedly was going to help people. What would be better than significant relief for shareholders in HDFCs? It just makes sense to me. And I think the best thing I need to do when I get this job is to be a good advocate, explaining to people why this matters, because it's a small enough community, but it has an outsized impact on opportunities for a multi-generational middle-class lifestyle in the city, which is desperately in peril, if not non-existent, basically. So, I'm excited to do this work.
Thank you. Okay, I see Ben Kallos in the next window.
This is very similar to previous questions, following a very similar theme. I support exactly what Tessa is suggesting, that I think that the city should not be charging interest on affordable housing in the way that they are. They shouldn't be forcing HDFCs out of affordable housing program that they have in home ownership and into third-party transfer and commercial real estate, who frankly have given campaign contributions to politicians. I think we should allow the HDFCs to remain, forgive them for whatever debt they have, not be charging them exorbitant interest. To the extent that if Tessa lives in a building where they're having difficulties with a particular board and she feels there's no other way around it, and the majority of the residents agree, then yes, I would support replacing them with another HDFC board. But I think that's as far as I would go from the specific questions. But again, we need to stop taking home ownership away from people just so that we can hand those buildings to landlords and turn people into tenants paying more than they currently are.
Thank you, Mr. Kallos. And again, sorry for your loss. Thank you very much. Okay, so then we have Councilmember Mark Levine.
Thank you, John. And I agree with what Ben just said. And I see it as very simple. When a building falls behind on water bill or property tax, there's one of two options. Either the city can offer some accommodation to allow them to be solvent and to remain an independent and healthy co-op. Generally, the amounts of money that are required to do that are quite small. Sometimes only 5 figures. And or the city can refuse to give ground, can refuse to accommodate. And then we move to option 2, which is the building will crash out of HDFC co-op status, will enter into third-party transfer, and will cost the city millions of dollars, millions. Not 5 figures, not 6 figures, millions, because you wipe out the existing liabilities and you almost always have to put millions into the building as part of the transfer to a private developer. And you're losing home ownership. So it is much more in the interest of the finances of the city, not to mention the mission of preserving home ownership, just to be accommodating so that HDFCs which fall behind on some of these charges can be made solvent again. And I've fought for that in a number of cases in buildings in my district, and we've been able to keep the buildings whole. It shouldn't be such a fight every time. We should have an administration, the various agencies that sees the long-term wisdom of being accommodating to keep these programs running, to keep the homeowners in their homes without losing this precious program.
Thank you. I'll just make a very quick comment and then I'm going to turn it back over to Mike and Cheryl and see where they want to go. I've seen numbers of the total number of HDFC apartments as greater than 33,000. If we assumed an average of 3 persons per apartment, that would be 99,000. I'm just looking at the 99,000 New Yorkers who live in HDFC co-ops. I'm just looking at the population of Albany right now. It's 97,478. So I just want to sort of point out that if the mayor of Albany woke up one morning and said that we're going to take over, we're going to take control of everyone's private home in Albany, you can imagine how long that person would be mayor. So this is just want to point out, we're here. We really appreciate you coming. Our numbers are far greater than anyone may really realize. We're going to be heard, but we'd love to work with people who want to help us restore these buildings and restore these neighborhoods as we've been doing for decades. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Mike and Cheryl and see where they want to go with the program. Thank you.
Nothing. We really want to wrap it up. We want to give everybody an opportunity to 2 minutes, or actually more now that some of the participants left, but so 2 minutes or so for final comments to our HDFC shareholders. And first up, let's make it Ben Kallos so he can have some food.
Thank you. It's less me and more about just being kind to my wife and partner. I want to thank all of you for spending your Friday night with us, and I want to thank Mark and Kim for their leadership on HDFC, and just April Tyler for just everything that she did, her leadership, and just fighting till the very end. And I will miss her greatly. Sorry, it's been a rough couple of days. So I'm Ben Kallos, as you know. I'm running for borough president because everywhere else in America, people struggle to get out, but here in New York City, people are struggling to stay. And together, I believe we can fix that. I think that we can build a Manhattan that's affordable, that supports our HDFCs, that builds more HDFCs, that supports your brothers and sisters and the Tills and the Mitchell Lamas. And I do have the Mitchell Lamas that we continue to support in my district. That continues to build more affordable housing. We've done 1,000 units in my district. We can end homelessness for families by putting them in all these vacant apartments everyone keeps talking about, but still hasn't lowered rents. I can tell you firsthand. We can bring the dream of home ownership that so many New Yorkers like me have given up on, and HDFCs can really lead the way. We can dismantle an HPD that's been going after our HDFCs, split it into a preservation agency and a separate development agency. And I think that we can do an amazing work to build a Manhattan for all of us. Proud to have the endorsement of Congressmember Maloney, 77 labor unions, from nurses to construction workers to bus drivers. And I really hope that I'm almost certain that I'm probably not going to be your number one, maybe not even your number two, but at least number 3 in ranked choice voting. And I hope you'll join our team at kallos.nyc to fight for a city where we no longer have to struggle to stay, where we can run a Manhattan for all of us. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ben. Lindsay.
So, you know, I came to New York City with $100 in my pocket after graduating from college because I wanted to be in urban planning, even though I didn't fully understand what that meant. I was about to learn. I bugged my first boss, Alexander Garvin, an urban planner, until he gave me my first job, and we were off to the races. I got into this field because Hurricane Katrina happened, and these conversations around how you rebuild in a more equitable way and you reimagine a city for people just were the most important and interesting questions in my view. And of course, we failed in New Orleans. We failed the people of New Orleans. I think we are in a scale more than, not more than, but significant in a moment in time in New York City's destiny, and specifically Manhattan. This is the heart of our city, our cultural heart, our economic heart. And I spent my whole career in this field of managing public spaces, financing public spaces and infrastructure, and then ultimately overseeing job creation and housing for the state of New York. And, you know, there's no greater opportunity, no more humbling opportunity that I would love to do than to be your partner. I think the central piece of figuring out a way forward is to make Manhattan especially livable. And that doesn't happen without home ownership. And I think specifically support for an expansion of HDFCs. I mean, all the greatest programs we have came to us in a moment of peril, frankly, for our city. And we are at a significantly moment of gravity. And I think we could and we must be doing a lot more for people. And I'm really excited to be your partner. And, you know, you need someone who has, in my view, the experience overseeing and managing large agencies of thousands of people and huge budgets, negotiating them, who's been in urban planning and when necessary is willing and able to speak truth to power. And boy, do we need that. I'm excited to take a few years off the end of my life to do this stressful job because I think it's so important for the city and for its future. And I would love to be your partner in that. So thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you very much. Kim Watkins.
Thank you, Michael. What a great conversation this has been. And the thing that I have been talking about as part of my platform is home ownership, because I am a beneficiary of this particular program. And I strongly believe that even though in Manhattan there is a great deal of transience, the fact that only 20% of apartments are owned in Manhattan is something that we should all be very concerned about. Not, again, because home ownership is this ideal that is going to make people rich, which I think is kind of the characterization that a lot of people think about when they think of home ownership. But when we talk about the idea of having agency in your home, being able to pass down your home to the next generation and equity, right? That is an issue that involves racial structural racism. And as I said before, it's also an equity issue for women, because in our day and age right now, we have a pay gap for women and men, but we also have a wealth gap. And that is really, really important, especially in communities of color. Women do not have agency in their housing stock, their housing relationship. So I've been focused on this from the very beginning. I am also the only candidate that's doing grassroots work with our public school system right now as an elected official for the public schools in District 3, which is Harlem and the Upper West Side. I believe that the vibrancy of our neighborhoods and really the very future of our city is dependent on the ability for us to lift up education. And as a function of that, we have to focus on the way that we can keep people in the city, keep our low income and middle income residents in the city, and allow them the space to create a high quality of life without the tenant landlord oppressive relationship. I'm Kim Watkins. I'm running for Manhattan Borough President because I am angry. My vantage point is one of someone who has dealt with these issues on a daily basis. Runwithkim.com is my web address. And I really do hope that I'll be talking to you again in the future and that you will consider me as your first choice in this election.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kim. And certainly last but not least, Mark Levine.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you, Kim, Lindsey. I'm not sure if Ben is still on, but for a great conversation. And thank you to the HDFC Coalition for bringing us together, for what you've done for this movement, for this sector. Partnering with you has really been one of the highlights of my time in office. And we've spoken so much about the details of the policy that I haven't had a chance to tell you a little bit about me. And I'll just tell you very briefly why I'm running for Borough President and the path that led me here. I actually started my career after college, having majored in physics. I became a bilingual math and science teacher at Junior High School 149 in the South Bronx. I went on to start a community development credit union, also a cooperative, a financial cooperative, right here in Washington Heights. It's called Neighborhood Trust. It's on 166th Street in St. Nick. And in fact, the credit union has made many loans to HDFC shareholders. And I'm really proud of that. I've been elected now twice in the 7th Council District. I chaired the Parks Committee in my first term, a true passionate supporter of green space. I passed landmark legislation establishing right to counsel for tenants facing eviction in housing court in 2017. It's been a game change in housing court. And now I'm chairing the Health Committee. And in that capacity, I've been fighting this pandemic with all my strength. And I'm running now to be your borough president, to take on this crisis. And I firmly believe that to come back as an economy, we need to preserve affordable home ownership in this borough. HDFCs must be protected and preserved and strengthened. You have an ally in me. And as borough president, I will fight with everything I have to help you continue to succeed as shareholders, as affordable cooperatives. That is my pledge. Thank you so much.
Great. Mark, thank you so much. And I'd like to thank all the candidates for participating in tonight's forum. You certainly didn't make it easy for HDFC shareholders to choose who will be the next borough president. You all had very, very good responses to our questions. And again, I want to thank you for coming and attending our forum. Tonight's forum was recorded, and we will be posting it on our website so that many other HDFC shareholders can get to hear your position and views on the issues that are important to us, the HDFC shareholder homeowner. Thank you so much for coming and attending our forum. Thank you all the attendees for coming. Please watch out for our next forum, which will probably be in the next couple of weeks, and it will focus on the councilship for Mark's seat, Council District 7, where there are the highest number of HDFCs and HDFC units in the city. But we invite everybody to come and listen and to learn about the issues that concern us. So again, thank you very much for coming tonight. I think we're
Thank
sort
you.
of ending a little bit on time, maybe a little bit over. But again, thank you so much, and may the best man or woman win.
Right. And stay safe.
And stay safe.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have to be the last one out because then the recording, I think it's supposed to come to me, or Cheryl, it may come to you because I'm not sure I'm a host anymore.
Okay.